plan example that Kareem did. Okay, let's go directly there and let's follow this. Now, just what he has here, this is what Dr. Banks wrote. Let's fill in because we don't want to just come and present. This is what I have. If we come in to do the presentation, let's present it like how we're going to teach it. We're supposed to be teachers, right? So let's teach the part that we have. But before that, let's go to the lesson plan example and let's run through it. And then as we go through it, we fill in what we're doing from our lesson.
Right.
Even the base scripture, right? Because this lesson plan is different. Okay? We can do that? Okay. The lesson plan example. All right. You skip the top now. We come to the lesson plan example. Let's do the example. The objective. Right? Preparing to teach the topic. What's the topic?
The human
human spirit.
Okay, the human spirit. That's first where Samara have to come to let us know what she's teaching, what we're teaching, what we're all teaching, right? And what is the purpose? What is the purpose of the lesson? What are we trying to establish?
Well, there are a few things we're trying to establish. One,
that
the human spirit.
We want to get the main content, right?
Right.
Okay.
That the human spirit is a part of the triune being, and what is the purpose of it? So those are the two things.
Okay. So that's what we focusing on, right? So every one of us have to flow with that. That's what everyone have to point to, right?
So we need to definitely write that.
The base scripture for what we want is what? What's our base scripture?
So based on what this is saying, the base
lesson,
scripture,
the human spirit, what's the base scripture that we're going to use?
Wouldn't it be
you could use it right out of the book.
You could do
Hebrews 4
and 12, maybe?
Yeah, Hebrews 4 and 12 is just confirming the triune being of showing us the triune being. And Thessalonians 5 and 23, showing that we were made in his image. So it's like Genesis 1:26, Hebrews 4 and 12, and Thessalonians 5 and 23 goes together.
Okay.
Could it be?
We gotta have a base one.
One
that
Genesis 1 and 26.
Okay.
You just confirm that one.
Okay.
Tasha, what do you think?
No.
Which one were you gonna?
No. Let's go ahead and we can read it and see if it works.
Now, let's look at seeing what the base scripture is supposed to do. Using this scripture, the lesson will illustrate the criteria God uses to approve his sons for ministry, right? Now, let's just go and we read what Doug has here so we would know where we fit in. Right? This is what you should be getting as the teacher. But once we get the base scripture, that's what the base scripture could do for you as the teacher.
So wouldn't a base scripture then be the Romans one? Romans 2:15, which show the work of the law written in their heart, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts, the means while accusing or excusing one another. So that, I think, tied with what Samara was saying about the internet being that connection to God, the conscience leading, because the conscience is the knower, right? So
You're frozen.
the conscience also
You froze
it also speaks to, sorry, our call was coming in, sorry about that. It also speaks to knowledge of the gospel, knowledge of good, knowledge of God, because it tells you that it bearing witness and their thoughts and means and so compared to it's a part of the triune being. You know, it gives you more of the purpose, which is what the chapter is about, the purpose of the spirit.
Okay.
That is,
One of the
That's
ones
exactly what
can I
that
say something?
purpose of the spirit.
when we went through the teaching with Apostle Kareem, his base scripture that he used for this teaching was Hebrews 4:12.
What
So-
I was going to say, can I say something real quick?
Mhm.
What Yole is saying, although that is true, remember we're building the lesson. So that scripture can come in the middle. It doesn't have to be at the very
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
So you want to start off with a base thing that will introduce the topic and where you're going. And as you build, you can include that. It will make more, it will come together better than you come out with this, you know, there's so much parts to it to get. There are a lot of parts to that one scripture, but if you start off with something that sets the pace, you know, the ideas are built around that, and then as you develop and build a lesson, then you know
those scriptures, right? Those scriptures should be supporting scriptures.
Right.
The base scripture should be the theme of what you're teaching, which
Right.
means the base scripture, all the other scriptures you have, the supporting scriptures, should come off of the base scripture. Just like Tashai is saying, once you have your base scripture, that should be the thing that you build off. Like all these other scriptures were coming in to say what it does, what the spirit does. But now let's agree on the base scripture and let's move on throughout the the planet. Because you could talk scriptures, because you could have a scripture, she could have a scripture, she could have a scripture that suits your part.
Yeah.
But the base scripture should cover the whole, could be able to cover the lesson, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And remember, when we say what is the purpose of the lesson is to establish it is a triune being, and the
Okay.
purpose of it, which would be Hebrews 4:12.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now go on. Where else? Where we at now? We done passed the objective.
Just now, I think I lost right now. Okay, we finished the topic. We finished the purpose of the theme or whatever we're trying to cover. Right, we're in the base scripture, which is
Hebrews 4:12.
Okay, let's go from there then.
Okay.
So Samara, that's what she would be introducing, right? The Hebrews 4:12 in her introduction.
Okay. And see, what we're trying to find out, what are we aiming to achieve with this lesson, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, we have to be clear on the desired outcome, what we're trying to get out of it, right? That's for the people.
Yes.
Is that right? And then we have to determine what effect it's having on the people. Now, all this comes with us as we go on teaching, right? Whoever now coming into these parts, like when Samara done do her part now, we have to determine the goal that we're trying to reach so we can leave that thread for the next person coming on, right? And we have to determine as we go on what effect we having on the audience. Are we reaching them? What impact it's having, right? Now together we're gonna determine what strategy, how are we gonna strategize to get all this accomplished? What type of approach? Because Samara have to be, she has to be vigilant on her approach, and she have to grasp that attention of those ones who she could teach. You starting it off, and then when Jagram come with his scripture, right? You gotta break it down and try to capture the audience. This lesson, what Dr. Banks did, and every one of us I know have a different teaching style. I guess Jagram is probably the only excited one in this. Probably him and Tashai, right? we have, no, and Tamika, right? So we have different styles, but let your style, be you. Don't hold back. Don't hold back. We got our base scripture. Well, now we're working on the content. The content where we come in, everybody else coming in. Your content has to be serious content, right?
Meat.
Meat. Okay. All right. So we got the objective. We have the base scripture. We got the. I guess we could put the introduction of the lesson in the objective, if you want to do it that way.
Okay.
Or you could bring it down after the base scripture. You could do the objective, say what you want, put the base scripture, and then introduce the lesson in a manner in which now people pay more attention.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. That one is actually a good idea.
Okay.
Do the base scripture and then do, yeah.
And then the content. Every one of us should have content. That is what we have to work on now. Content. And in our content, we want to be able to explain what we teach into, right? You may have some serious content. You have to be able to explain your content to keep the audience and to make sure they understand where we're going. Let's just do it that way. Let's fill it in.
It actually can work.
And then everybody with their own teaching method will make sure we follow and flow off for the next person. We follow and we flow off for the next person. Now, if somebody go way back, that's why this have to flow. This have to be in concession where we don't overlap scriptures, and like the Shai say, all the scriptures that we have you probably could use, but it has to suit your point. It has to fit your point. You just can't use it because it's saying something with the spirit.
All right, Bishop, let's do this by step, so we get this correct. We're doing the introduction. The base scripture comes after, right?
Yeah, we're doing the objective. Let us state what we're trying, Let us state that first.
Okay. The objective. Okay. What comes next?
The base scripture.
And the base picture, and then she was going from that she would talk about the use her illustration to unpack that base scripture.
Introduce that as
Okay, good. Right. So, and we're still going in line with the manual too, are we?
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
Because you all already
that kind of put it into the sections
right.
to achieve those objectives.
Everybody already chose the part they was going to minister, so you have to stay there, and then everybody have to know who they following.
So just to be clear, the base for the entire lesson is the Hebrews 4 and 12, but the scriptures that we may have for our part will be the supporting scriptures for that base, correct? Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
yes.
I just wanted to make sure I understood it. Thank you.
And your point, your scripture could, you're gonna have an example that a scripture was in the book isn't your scripture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It might bring out your point much better than
what's in. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Then we have what?
After that, we have to talk about the conscience. So that, I mean, it's not in order where we have it here,
No, yeah, I thought you already said the order.
No, that, because when I look at comparing to the manual, the objectives, we took that order, but according to the manual, Daniel would come right after the introduction to talk about the conscience.
Okay, so if that's the way it's gonna be, just
Yeah.
determine it now so we can
Yeah.
put it together and then we can flow with it.
Yeah, and then the others would come in with what the conscience
Okay, who's after
entails
Daniel?
of.
I
Who's
think
after?
I think after Daniel will be myself, which
That's
is
right.
nature and instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is next? What's that?
Nature and instinct.
Okay. Pastor Jagram, you after Samara, right?
No, well, as far as I see now, it changed up.
Yeah, because he only had scriptural foundation. That's the objective. Now, the scriptural foundation is that's the base scripture we're talking about, and each section have a scripture that goes with it.
Okay.
So it'll be like you have nothing because everything is covered while they are,
No, but he just going there.
No, he can, because what I had thought about was that he could do that linking scripture. So Samaro, so it's either he introduces, since we're starting with the base scripture. You understand? So if we're going to start with the base scripture, and he's going to be the one that does the objective and the introduction first, and then do the scriptural foundation that we are setting, the tone, and then Samara
Yeah.
explains what it
With the
is, and then
illustration.
goes in with the illustration, and then we go in. So since he's the one that's unpacking that base scripture, and then she's doing the illustration,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he's still doing the scriptural foundation, and then from there, lead into, because you can have a base and a oh,
Supporting scriptures with the base.
there you go, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Samara does her thing, and then Liz, you'll be next, right?
Yeah, I come.
About nature.
Yeah,
No,
so I-
nature comes in as something that the conscience includes. So the conscience still have to come
First.
first.
conscience will go first, I think.
Yeah,
So who is conscience? Daniel.
that will be Daniel.
All right. So Daniel was after Samara.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Fourth, third.
Let me just write down this.
Then who?
Right, and then some more.
And then you have who's ever doing the knowledge of God. Don, is it Don?
Just
No, Don is doing
no.
something about conscience.
the knowledge of God is Pastor Tamika.
Okay, sorry.
Conscience.
Oh, I think I had it mixed.
Mm-hmm. So, and then after Pastor Tamika would be Dawn, knowledge of good.
Can I just review something, because I think what we had before would work. Even when we're talking about nature and instinct, if you look at the third objective, it says analyze the role of the conscience. So although she's taking nature and instinct, it falls under the conscience.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
Liz could still.
It all fall under the conscience, the nature and instinct, knowledge of God, knowledge of good, and also the knowledge of the gospel. All that falls under conscience.
Right, but she could
Yeah.
introduce it, right? You understand? She could,
Yeah.
that topic that we're looking at when
What
we
I-
say conscience.
So Daniel will be introducing those things. When he introduced the conscience, he will introduce what it entails, and they will be breaking apart the what it entails.
Okay. What did Daniel have before? Okay.
What do you think?
Daniel, what was your idea to unpack that? Could you just remind us, please?
Well, I did some stuff differently. I didn't really made a good explanation of it, but I got two scriptures that kind of go with what I want to say. The two scriptures are Romans 2, 14 to 15, and Romans 9:1.
Is that 1 and 1 or 9 and 1, Daniel?
Romans 9:1.
9 and 1.
So were you gonna use an illustration, Daniel, or you were gonna just use the scripture so that we can kind of know what the flow, so Elizabeth can come in?
I would definitely be using those two scriptures because I think that's the one that I think that would explain the conscience best, I think.
Romans 9 and 1. What's the other one?
He put it in the chat.
Yeah.
2:14 and 15.
Romans 2:14.
I think you could consider also 1 Peter 3 and 4. It describes the conscience, what the conscience is. Somebody could bear me out with that.
1 Peter 3 and 4.
Yeah, I think it's referred to as a hidden man of the heart, because you will describe the conscience, right?
This is where we gotta be careful not to overlap.
Right.
I think this is what Tashai was trying to point out.
No,
That it could have been all encompassing, just use a portion of each to define the conscience. But now it might rob somebody else out of a part.
yeah,
Let's see.
yeah,
Let's
that
see.
it will.
Yeah, let's see if we don't repeat same thing inside of this.
Right. So that's why I wanted to know, what is Daniel. So it's like how, so Jagram said that he's gonna do Genesis 1 and the Hebrews 4. So he'll show the
Yeah,
link.
he'll start off with the base scripture, which is Hebrews 4 and 12.
Right, and then show the overall link.
And yeah,
And then
show
Samara is gonna
supporting
do the
scripture.
illustration. So now Daniel is going to introduce the purpose of the conscience, which is really, so that was purpose 1. So we have 2 purposes based on our lesson plan, right? Showing that we're a triune being just like God, and what exactly is the role of the conscience. So Daniel, you're the introduction to that, because then that's how the rest of us flow after you. So we just needed to, because okay, you could do all the scriptures, but all the scriptures, then are we going to unpack that? Are you going to unpack it? Are you just introducing scriptures? How are we going to do that to make it work so that it flows in a way, as Tashai says, where everybody is giving an explanation, adding the meat to what was already added?
Yeah, and remember, even in the introduction, when they talk about the human spirit, the manual say it was formed from air. So all those things would come in before Daniel to give him his good foundation where he will be now. Because the conscience is basically God shared his knowledge with us. And that knowledge that he shared with us will break down into where Liz and them have to come in. So even though we're establishing we're a triune being and all of that, it must also say where the human spirit came from, what it was made of, and all of that. we have to cover that it was formed from the air. It's an earthen element.
So wasn't that diagram?
No, he was just what, base scripture and
Yeah, that will
okay.
be, that will be what you're talking about, Shalisa. That will be like the intro. With
Okay.
Yeah, that's intro
diagrams
with
part.
diagram.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that
we
is
have to,
diagrams part.
yeah,
That's
we
what I
gotta
want to
connect
know.
the dot. Yeah, we have to connect
Good,
the
good.
dot showing how the spirit now, because we're talking about the human spirit. But when and then Samara is gonna come in with the
With the illustration.
illustration. So
Good.
you
So
gotta
what-
tie
yeah.
you
wanna
gotta
make a
tie
good-
the spirit,
Mhm.
how the spirit and the conscience are kind of
Right.
like the same thing. And then you
Yeah.
tell about, you know, you have to kind of, I
Yeah,
guess,
'cause we want to
that's
make
where
a
Daniel
good
will come in.
foundation before Daniel comes in, you know, so it wouldn't be a big gap there.
Yeah, because they can be used interchangeably, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? So it just depends on how you're viewing it in the scripture. So really the spirit
Okay.
and you know what I mean? And all that is and the conscious is kind of like you could interchangeably. So I guess yeah.
Because that's already at the front. So then because this is, it literally has to flow. Samara, what do you end with? You end with saying that God is that link to the conscience. It's linked to God. So the conscience basically poses that knowledge that God has innately put in man. Daniel, you now need to pick that up and break it back out into the parts. So yes, you have these scriptures, but it has to tie with how she ends, because it can't be she ends and then it starts like patchwork instead of flowing. So if
Yeah.
she ended that and saying that this is God trickling down the information, you now have to link that as to why is that possible? How is that work? How does that work? Why is it that the conscience is God's
Knowledge shared.
knowledge,
Yeah.
basically shared with us? So
So
you need to put that in and tie that so that Liz can come in with nature and instinct and the knowledge of God, and it trickles down.
yeah. So he may not even need to use those scriptures.
No, may not, unless it is that whatever he's trying to, the meat that he's putting there, the scriptures exemplify it and bring it out. Like what Tashai was saying earlier.
Once Jack Graham give his base scripture, whether he use one or two, Samara will come and she would give basically the lesson in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Right? And then everyone behind that is breaking down the lesson piece so that you can understand using your corroborating scriptures. All right. So Samara, what she's doing is she is surmising the lesson to people so that when you now teach it from principles of the scripture, they would understand it based on the scripture, what she has taught. Because remember, she's using some natural analogies of the phone and the internet and the network provider and all of that, so people could understand it from a practical point of view. So she's breaking down the lesson. She's putting the lesson in a nutshell. He's introducing what the lesson is all about, right?
Yeah.
And then now, after they come behind tomorrow, we're trying to make sure that they understand, right? And we got to make sure that they grasp what we're saying. That's why everybody got to break down their parts. Everybody just break it down with their scriptures and then come with your analogies and whatnot. But in actuality, Samara really is telling them what the lesson is all about. It should be easy from there, because if one part is left out, just say, for instance, the part with the network provider being the source. If that's left out, we need to be hearing that. We need to be hearing for that. And then whoever is coming behind that now needs to bring that in. Okay? So, and then because now inside of that, everyone after Samara is the content. And then Pastor Shalizi, you come behind and you summarize all of that, what was said, picking out the main points that they need to hold on to so that they can have a visual of the message. She's going to present the visual. She's going to present the visual. So now they're looking for it when they say, well, how is this and how is that? Someone in the middle with the content supposed to now show that piece by piece by piece.
Can I?
Wrap it up.
Can I? Can
Yes.
I? So I'm happy that it said that. So no, something came clear to me from my teaching. So I can say, when the phone's ringing, you know the phone's ringing. You hear it. Some people feel it because it's on vibrate. So you know something's coming in. There's a notification. It's the same thing when a preacher comes and is preaching the gospel, right?
Exactly.
And the mystery now is revealed.
Exactly.
Because the gospel is the good news of the kingdom. And it's centered around the teaching of death, life, resurrection of God. And it transforms the believer because you know on the inside. So it's still tying back to the illustration. You understand what I'm saying, Daniel?
Yes.
So I'm going to use the phone ringing as a part of my thing, because knowledge of the gospel, you hear the gospel. So I'm using something that is heard, right? Or even the conversation on the telephone. You don't know that you're talking to someone on the phone, you hear the voice, right? And based on what you hear, you know that this person is mommy, this person is your father, whatever. People know that that's God. So that illustration can be used to pull it together.
Yes, because
So,
that's describing the concept of the whole lesson. What she did,
right.
that's
What
describing.
she did.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that helping her of parts that she might not have the time to bring out,
The time to bring out, right.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, how it can be brought in relative to that. So I'll just use a phone conversation.
As a matter of fact, that helping her of parts that she might not have the time to bring out,
The time to bring out, right.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, how it can be brought in relative to that. So I'll just use a phone conversation.
That's it in a nutshell,
So, Bishop Marv, you say I may not have to use these scriptures that I put out.
You don't have to use all.
So, I was wondering if you could look at what I have here.
Yeah.
Because I'm really not sure what what I'm doing here.
Conscience, also known as the human spirit.
Look at what the
Where is it?
Look at what Emmanuel says, Bishop. The human spirit is more commonly referred to as the conscience. And then they give a breakdown of what the word conscience is interpreted as knowledge shared with others.
Right.
And then it goes on to say the conscience is a non-physical aspect of humans that guides the soul by communicating God-given knowledge to it. Right? So it just give a breakdown of what the conscience is. So it was knowledge shared with others. That's what the meaning of conscience. God shared his knowledge with us. Right? And that knowledge that conscience is alive in us and directing us, always pointing us to God, always pointing us to what pleases God, at what, you don't have to have all of the knowledge or intellect or whatever, but that conscience is there to always
The conscience is the
this
know.
is God, yes.
Conscience knows God.
you know,
That's one part of the human
Mhm.
spirit. Everybody know that it knows God.
Okay, Daniel, I think what you've written is very good, but you remember that you're also bringing in everybody behind you, right? So you also still have to give your the subheadings that Elizabeth, Tashai, Tamika, and
Yeah, yeah.
myself, Paul, you still have to bring it in because remember too that we're teaching from this manual and the
Mhm.
student is still reading this manual. So though we're breaking it down into simple words that they can understand, right? And as if you interject your scriptures in that, it still comes out to the 5 minutes, but you have to make sure that you are still introducing everybody because you are the start of the purpose of the conscience, right? And you highlighted that very well here. So you have written it out well, but you still have to,
Yeah, you have to make it palatable, you know. So that's your portion right there, Daniel, all of it, or you going to use the scriptures first?
That's my portion.
Okay.
Yeah, he may just need to add that that knowledge come in 4 distinct forms. That's where he'll introduce the 4 different ones: nature and instinct, knowledge of God, knowledge of good, and knowledge of the gospel.
All right. When you do it, I guess I assume you know that, right? You know all of what you written. I'm talking about know it to the point of belief, not
Yes.
just know it in theory.
Yes, I
Okay.
do believe what happened. Yeah.
Okay. So just know it and then bring it like how you know it, so you can make it palatable for others and use your scriptures.